I was feeling like I want to talk a little more about, in terms of talking about the radiant core and talking about what keeps us from experiencing that. And certainly aversion is in there. It falls in the category of protection in general. That to experience our radiant presence, the light of our being, unobstructed, we have to take off our armor. And you know, there's certain types of armor that are maybe obvious to people, particularly when you are triggered by some event and a kind of anger comes out, or maybe like in this meditation with the sound, there's something protective that wants it to stop, like it's trying to protect your experience, your tranquility, and the noise just keeps going. So in that moment, you can notice what is operating this protective energy. It begins with noticing it. But sometimes the protective energy is so, what should I say? We are so oblivious to it. We are so identified with it. We are so convinced that it's who we actually are, that we can't even see it. Probably the biggest reason why we don't experience the radiant core is that we are identified with something less than it in our personality. I sometimes talk about this as the anxious doer, but that may be a little bit misleading, because we may only notice that anxious doer in moments where we actually feel some anxiety. But there's the presence of kind of I'll call it a manager. There's the presence of the part of the mind that is responsible for us moving through the world and getting things done, which is almost omnipresent. I have a pretty good manager. It manages to get the notices for these classes out in a timely way. It manages to respond to the people who say they want to be in the class and make a class list and get you all on the email. It all takes that kind of consciousness, that managerial consciousness. And obviously my manager slipped up tonight because I didn't plug in the microphone. So he wasn't quite on task. So I like the manager. You know, I like the managerial part of me. But the manager is not what I'll just call the holy inside. It's not the holy presence that we are. And it's interesting because sometimes we might only experience that when the management fails. I was speaking with someone last week who was very frustrated with themselves and really wanted pointers on what to do when certain situations arise. That's a manager question. It's a good question to have tools to pull out, in this case, in the face of difficult feelings, it's good to have all those tools. And in some ways, the Theravadan Buddhist tradition is great at supplying tools, things that the manager part of us can pick up in the form of practice when we are in difficult times. And yet there's a kind of seduction to that, of always having the tools, always bringing the tools out in your toolkit to deal with things. And so sometimes it takes a moment where the manager is helpless, powerless, to reveal the deeper presence that we are. In the meditation, the instructions of the meditation, there are, what should I say? They're kind of instructions to disable certain functions of your mind. So that function of knowing what one wants and trying to get it is disabled. So getting what one wants and avoiding what one doesn't want, those two very powerful functions that are often playing about getting what one wants, avoiding what one don't want, and not noticing anything that doesn't fall in those categories, being oblivious to it. When we meditate, we set that aside, at least hopefully. It doesn't always stay set aside. But there's the invitation to simply to open to the experience as it is. So if there's something in the unwanted category happening, to just receive that, to just know it as it is. Whether that's an ache in the body, whether it's a sound that's intruding. It's interesting because I was conscious of the dog barking, and there's something very self-conscious in me about that. And I didn't know about the buzz. But it's the same thing, kind of what lights up as unwanted, not ideal, not okay, to relax within that. And if there's a sense of something one is trying to reach for that's not present, to just relax that grasping. And it's coming into this place of just receiving, just knowing experience as it is, that begins to put you more and more into the core of your presence. And as you relax some of these other things that are going on, perhaps relax the mind, thinking, perhaps there's a little less thinking. Perhaps you get a sense of just the integrity of the bodies and the bodily experience. And for some moments at least, are not kind of thinking outside of that. And just get that sense of that. Perhaps there's an enjoyment of being that begins to develop. And perhaps there's a noticing of just the light of presence, the light of one's being. And that's the meditation. Waking up to that simplicity of awakeness, one could say, that imbues everything, that imbues the body imbues the whole visual field, imbues all of hearing, it imbues the thinking mind. It's all luminous. It's all imbued with the capacity to be recognized and known. And yet that very knowing quality is invisible, empty. It's no form anywhere that one can find. I use words like presence to point to it, but where do you see it? And I use radiant, I think, a bit metaphorically to talk about that way that our experience is imbued with awareness. It is soaked in it. We are swimming in it. And we are like the fish that doesn't know it's in water. And as you just begin to touch and notice that immersion, there's the feeling of non-separation right in it. There's a feeling of stillness. And there's the felt sense of the infinite in it. That something is limitless in that knowing that is imbuing this moment. Perhaps the thinking mind won't let you go there. The thinking mind doesn't know that infinite quality. Perhaps you feel the heart and touch something infinite, something unbound and unbounded. And something wants me to like lift the armor off your shoulders and set it down. You know, the protectedness. All that we have to do to survive, to get through the day, to meet our obligations. To show up in a social world, hold power within it. It's really complicated being a human being. Lots of stuff going on. And so oftentimes we just fuse with those parts of us that are dealing with all that being thrown at us so often and so quickly. So it's really valuable to ground down in this presence. It's why I encourage people to meditate every day. And yet it's not just about meditating every day. It's here in any moment that it's noticed. One can just open, recognize the power of this moment. Okay.